There was a debate held recently where I think it was Jonathan Friedland was interviewing Jack Straw. It was sponsored by Unlock Democracy, and I think other organisations. I actually listened to the podcast of that, and there was a point where Polly Toynbee started talking about a proportional system for the Commons, and you could actually audibly hear Jack Straw on the soundtrack say, "Oh, for God's sake." He then came out with his usual arguments against electoral reform. When you have people who are so viscerally opposed to a proportional system for the Commons in the Cabinet, how likely do you think it is that we're actually going to get the referendum that you want?
Question. I'd say there have always and there will always be a few implacably imposed people, and Jack Straw is one of those that, partly because we're so good at pestering on this issue, that he goes, oh gosh, because he gets it about this issue. But more and more we're seeing more cabinet ministers, more people high up in the Labour Party coming out in favour of electoral reform. And even if they're not yet in favour of proportional representation, they're coming out and saying, hey, we need this debate, and maybe this referendum is a good idea, so that the decision is made, taken out of our hands and it's given to the people to decide. And just in the last few months, you've had people like Alan Johnson and John Denham, and Ben Bradshaw, 3 cabinet ministers, all kind of publicly going in favour of PR. But more than that, you've had other figures who have said, "Hey, I'm actually starting, questioning my former opposition to PR." You've had Tom Watson, who back in the 90s, a Labour MP, but back in the 90s was a political advisor to the AWU trade union, and he was the guy doing the first past the post campaign, so proposing the Jenkins Commission. He was leading it. Now he said, actually, I was wrong, times have changed, things are different, we need something else. Roy Hattersley, James Purnell, there are various other Labour Party people who have come to that position, and even on last Thursday, it's only a couple of days ago, at the TUC conference, trade unions used to be one of the major opposition blocks to electoral reform. A motion was passed at the TUC conference saying, yes, now is the time that we need to have a debate on electoral reform. So they didn't back PR, but they said, look, this is now a serious issue that we need to have a proper debate on. And you had the GMB union supporting that. Paul Kenny, the leader of the GMB union, again said, hey, look, I was wrong before, this is what we need now. You've got obviously PCS union, CWU Communication Workers Union, all in favour. Unison Unite, who previously would have been opposed, abstained on that motion, and that's very significant because it actually says, look, this is something politically being talked about, not yet there and getting the referendum and winning the argument, but we're significantly further on than we were before.
Isn't it harder to win the argument though when we're now in a position where Labour's been in power for over 12 years and they've had 12 years to do this, and it seems now that either some Labour politicians or some Labour supporting organisations are now coming round to the idea just at the point when it looks like Labour are facing electoral oblivion. Are you frustrated that it's taken this long, and do you also understand some of the opponents of electoral reform will use the argument that really Labour are just trying to do it to save their own skin at this late stage?
So of course I'm frustrated that the Labour Party didn't do more, since '97, since it came in. It had the Jenkins Commission, it had the recommendation of AB+, and it didn't go for that referendum. Of course I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated it's taken this long to seriously look at it again, even though it has been bubbling underneath the surface. But, and there will always be people in politics who look at which way the tide is going and go for that. I'll understand that, but actually people, the expenses crisis and the aftermath and the campaigning that Make Votes Count and other supporters did on it really has scared politicians into actually going, this time we need to be a bit more serious about the changes that we want to, changes in politics. And so I think there are more heartfelt as well as just simply pragmatic reasons why the Labour Party is looking again at this issue. And it's not, let me be clear, it's not about fixing the next election. We wouldn't support anything that was remotely connected with that. This is about having a referendum on the day of the next election so that people can decide how they want to elect their MPs in the future. The next election will still be sadly on a first past the post basis, but this is about saying let this be the last time this actually happens. And I say that to me is a persuasive argument no matter what party you support. So that would be for that. And I think just that this is an important moment for people to gather around. This may not be everything that we've ever dreamed about. I mean, this is the theme of the Fringe that Make Votes Count and Vote for a Change are doing at the Lib Dems this lunchtime. It may not be everything that we've ever dreamed about coming true in terms of this moment and what we can push forward for PR. We're not going to get a single transferable vote for the next election, but we actually have this moment to really make a breakthrough, much more than we've ever had before. I'm not going to rest until we have PR for the Commons, and I will not accept just simply AV and that's all. I will keep on pushing for the alternative vote. I will keep on pushing so that we have PR for the Commons.
Okay. What one thing would you ask supporters of electoral reform to do at this point?
At this point, as I say, we've got a critical time ahead this next month and a half before the Queen's speech, and we want to make as much of an impact on politicians and in the media as we can in the run-up to the Queen's speech to try and push this issue on, see if we can get it, the referendum issue, into the Queen's speech. What can people do? I say Vote for a Change. I say it's the campaign going on at the moment. Vote for a Change website, www.voteforachange.co.uk. Go on there, sign in, and that's where, so sign up to the campaign there, that's where you'll get regular updates and actions to do. But the number one thing, I'd say the two things you can do right now, one, apart from that, is write to your MP and tell them about the campaign and ask them where they stand in a referendum and say, it doesn't matter if they don't support electoral reform, it's about saying, give us the people the chance to choose how we elect our MPs. So just support the referendum idea. And then the second bit, November the 5th is when we're having a day of action. See, November the 5th, very sort of good timing in terms of connections with Parliament and what happens in terms of trying to change things in Parliament, and that's when we're having a national day of action. I say more details are going to be released very soon, but that's what we want people to do, is something around Bonfire Weekend.
Okay, thanks very much for your time, Malcolm.
Thank you.